The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of Dr. Sarah Chen's psychology practice, casting long shadows across the hardwood floor where she sat with her newest client, Marcus Rivera. A successful corporate executive in his mid-40s, Marcus had come seeking answers to questions he couldn't quite articulate, questions about identity, purpose, and the persistent feeling that he was living someone else's life. "I want you to close your eyes," Dr. Chen said gently, her voice steady and reassuring. "I'm going to show you something, and I need you to respond with the very first thing that comes to mind. Don't think, don't analyze, just respond." Marcus shifted in his leather chair, his expensive suit suddenly feeling constrictive. "Is this some kind of test?" "In a way, yes. It's based on the work of Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist who believed our unconscious minds hold keys to understanding our true selves. Are you ready?" Marcus nodded, closing his eyes as instructed. Dr. Chen opened her tablet and selected an image she had used countless times before, a simple illustration showing 5 horses in different poses and settings. "Open your eyes and look at this image. In 3 seconds or less, choose a horse. Don't think about it, just point to the one that calls to you." The image appeared before Marcus, 5 distinct horses, each representing different archetypal energies. The first horse stood proud and black against a mountainous backdrop, its mane flowing in an unseen wind, a symbol of power, mystery, and the untamed aspects of the psyche. The second horse was white, galloping freely across an open field, representing purity, freedom, and spiritual transcendence. The third horse was brown, sturdy and reliable, standing in a pastoral setting that spoke to worthiness, stability, and groundedness. The fourth horse was spotted, playful and spirited, embodying creativity, uniqueness, and the willingness to stand out. The fifth horse appeared tired, its head lowered, standing in a confined space, a representation of burden, resignation, and the parts of ourselves we've allowed to become worn down by life's pressures. Without hesitation, Marcus's finger moved to the tired horse, the one with its head hung low. The moment he made his choice, something shifted in his expression, as if a door had been opened to a room he had long kept locked. Dr. Chen observed his reaction carefully. In her 15 years of practice, she had administered this Jungian exercise hundreds of times, and she had learned to read the subtle signs that indicated when someone had encountered a truth they weren't prepared to face. "Why did you choose that horse?" she asked softly. Marcus stared at the image, his successful executive facade beginning to crack. I don't know. It just felt familiar." This moment of recognition marked the beginning of Marcus's journey into what Jung called the shadow, those aspects of ourselves that we reject, deny, or fail to acknowledge. The tired horse he had chosen so instinctively represented the exhausted, overwhelmed, and spiritually depleted parts of his psyche that he had been carrying for years without conscious awareness. Jung believed that our unconscious minds operate far more quickly and intuitively than our conscious thoughts. When we're asked to make an immediate choice, like selecting a horse in 3 seconds, we bypass the analytical mind and tap directly into our deeper psychological truths. The horse we choose becomes a mirror, reflecting back aspects of our inner landscape that we might otherwise never see. As Marcus sat in uncomfortable silence, Dr. Chen began to explain the theoretical foundation underlying his spontaneous choice. Carl Gustav Jung, the pioneering psychologist who lived from 1875 to 1961, developed revolutionary theories about the human psyche that challenged the prevailing scientific thinking of his time. Unlike his contemporary Sigmund Freud, who focused primarily on sexual and aggressive drives, Jung believed that the unconscious mind contained not just repressed memories and desires, but also profound wisdom and creative potential. "The horse you chose," Dr. Chen explained, "represents what Jung would call a complex and emotionally charged cluster of ideas or images in your unconscious mind. When you pointed to the tired horse without thinking, you were revealing something about how you see yourself, perhaps something you haven't fully acknowledged." Jung's approach to understanding the psyche was revolutionary because it suggested that our unconscious minds are not merely repositories of forgotten experiences or suppressed urges, but active, intelligent systems capable of providing guidance and insight. He believed that symptoms, dreams, and spontaneous choices like the one Marcus had just made were actually attempts by the unconscious to communicate important information to the conscious mind. The concept of the weak self that Jung identified is not weakness in the conventional sense, but rather those aspects of our personality that have become rigid, limited, or disconnected from our authentic nature. For Marcus, the tired horse represented years of living according to external expectations rather than internal truth. He had built a successful career, accumulated wealth and status symbols, but somewhere along the way, he had lost touch with his own vitality and purpose. Marcus's story was not unique. Dr. Chen had seen similar patterns in dozens of clients over the years, successful people who had achieved everything they thought they wanted, only to find themselves feeling empty and disconnected. The psychological concept Jung termed individuation describes the process of becoming who we truly are, rather than who we think we should be or who others expect us to be. "Tell me about your childhood," Dr. Chen said, knowing that the roots of Marcus's current condition likely stretched back decades. "What kind of horse were you then?" Marcus closed his eyes again, this time traveling back through memories he had long suppressed. He remembered being 8 years old, running through the fields behind his grandmother's house in rural Mexico, his imagination transforming him into a wild stallion racing across endless plains. There had been a time when he felt powerful, free, unlimited in his potential. "I was the black horse," he said quietly, surprising himself with the certainty in his voice. "I was strong, fearless. I felt like I could do anything." This revelation illuminated a crucial aspect of Jung's theory: we all begin life with access to multiple archetypal energies within our psyche. The black horse that Marcus remembered being represented his connection to personal power, instinct, and authentic self-expression. Somewhere between childhood and middle age, that energetic, powerful part of him had been systematically diminished, replaced by the tired, burdened horse he had chosen so instinctively just minutes earlier. The process by which we lose touch with our authentic selves is often gradual and unconscious. Family expectations, social pressures, educational systems, and cultural norms all contribute to the formation of what Jung called the persona, the mask we wear to fit in and meet others' expectations. While the persona serves important social functions, problems arise when we become so identified with the mask that we forget there's a real person underneath. Marcus's journey from the black horse to the tired horse had begun in childhood when his immigrant parents, desperate for their son to succeed in America, had pushed him toward academic excellence and financial security. Their intentions were loving, but the message he internalized was that his natural exuberance and creativity were less valuable than conformity and achievement. Year after year, he had learned to suppress the wild stallion within him, replacing spontaneity with calculation, passion with productivity. Jung's insight was that this kind of self-suppression creates what he termed neurosis, not mental illness in the clinical sense, but a condition of being disconnected from one's true nature. The tired horse that Marcus had chosen represented the accumulated weight of decades spent living someone else's version of success. But Jung's psychology offered hope alongside diagnosis. He believed that the very symptoms that brought people to therapy, the depression, anxiety, and sense of meaninglessness that Marcus was experiencing, were actually invitations from the unconscious to embark on a journey of self-discovery and healing. "The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others," Jung once observed, and this statement contained the key to understanding the transformative potential hidden within psychological crisis. The weak self Jung referred to was not weakness in terms of character or capability, but rather the false self that has become disconnected from authentic power and purpose. Over the following weeks, Marcus began to explore the various horses within his psyche, learning to recognize and integrate the different archetypal energies that Jung believed exist within every human being. The white horse represented his capacity for spiritual connection and transcendence, qualities he had abandoned in his pursuit of material success. The brown horse embodied his need for stability and grounding, which had become excessive and limiting. The spotted horse reflected his creativity and uniqueness, aspects of himself he had learned to hide in corporate boardrooms. But it was the black horse, the symbol of instinctual power and authentic self-expression, that held the key to his transformation. Jung believed that healing comes not from eliminating difficult emotions or challenging aspects of personality, but from learning to relate to them consciously and constructively. "Your tired horse isn't your enemy," Dr. Chen explained during one of their sessions. "It's a part of you that's been carrying a heavy load for a very long time. The question is, what would happen if you acknowledged its burden and gave it permission to rest?" This question opened up entirely new possibilities for Marcus. Instead of judging the exhausted parts of himself, he began to develop compassion for the years of overwork and self-denial he had endured. He started to understand that his fatigue was not a character flaw but a natural response to living in constant conflict with his authentic nature. Jung's approach to psychological healing emphasized the importance of what he called holding the tension of the opposites. Rather than choosing between the tired horse and the black horse, Marcus learned to recognize that both were valid aspects of his psyche. The tired horse had protected him by ensuring his survival and success in a demanding world. The black horse represented the part of him that longed for freedom, passion, and authentic self-expression. The process of psychological integration that Jung termed individuation involves learning to hold space for these seemingly contradictory aspects of ourselves without immediately trying to resolve the tension. This is radically different from most approaches to personal development, which typically encourage people to eliminate negative traits and cultivate positive ones. As Marcus deepened his understanding of Jung's psychology, he began to see that his spontaneous choice of the tired horse had been a gift rather than a limitation. His unconscious mind had been trying to show him exactly what needed attention and care. By bringing this exhausted part of himself into conscious awareness, he created the possibility for genuine healing and transformation. The journey from the tired horse back to the black horse was not simple or linear. Jung understood that psychological growth requires what he called a circumambulation, a circular process of approaching the same issues from different angles over time, gradually deepening understanding and integration. Marcus began to notice the tired horse's influence in various aspects of his life. At work, he recognized how he had been going through the motions, achieving success while feeling increasingly disconnected from any sense of purpose or passion. In his relationships, he saw how exhaustion had made him emotionally unavailable, present in body but absent in spirit. Even his hobbies and interests had become perfunctory, activities he pursued because he felt he should rather than because they brought him joy. But, alongside these realizations came glimpses of the black horse's power still alive within him. During a weekend hiking trip, Marcus found himself feeling energized and alive in ways he hadn't experienced in years. The physical challenge of climbing steep trails awakened something primal and vital within him. For brief moments, he could feel the wild stallion of his childhood stirring to life. Jung believed that such moments of reconnection with our authentic nature are not accidents but invitations from the unconscious to begin the work of individuation. The spontaneous surge of energy Marcus felt while hiking was his psyche's way of showing him that the black horse, his connection to personal power and authentic self-expression, was still available to him. The process of destroying the weak self, as Jung understood it, is not about becoming harsh or critical toward ourselves, but about releasing identification with limiting beliefs and patterns that no longer serve us. Marcus's weak self was the part of him that believed he had to choose between success and authenticity, between security and passion, between meeting others' expectations and honoring his own truth. Over months of therapeutic work, Marcus began to experiment with small acts of rebellion against the tired horse's reign over his life. He started leaving work at reasonable hours, despite cultural pressure to stay late. He enrolled in a pottery class, remembering his childhood love of working with his hands. He began saying no to social obligations that felt draining and yes to activities that energized him. Each of these choices represented a small victory of the black horse over the tired horse, but Jung's psychology taught Marcus that the goal was not to eliminate the tired horse entirely. Instead, he learned to recognize when exhaustion was a signal that he was operating from the false self rather than his authentic nature. The transformation that Jung envisioned through individuation is not a one-time achievement but an ongoing process of conscious relationship with all aspects of the psyche. Marcus discovered that he could access different archetypal energies, different horses within himself, depending on what was needed in any given situation. Sometimes the stability of the brown horse was appropriate, other times the creativity of the spotted horse or the transcendence of the white horse served him better. But it was his renewed connection to the black horse, his instinctual power and authentic self-expression, that became the foundation for all other aspects of his psychological development. Jung believed that each person has a unique configuration of archetypal energies, and that psychological health depends on conscious access to this full range of inner resources. The statement "the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others" reveals one of Jung's most profound insights about psychological resilience. When we operate from our authentic nature, from the horse that truly represents our deepest truth, we become much less vulnerable to external manipulation, criticism, or control. Marcus began to understand this principle through direct experience. As he reconnected with his authentic power and passion, he found that the opinions and expectations of others had less impact on his emotional well-being. Criticism that might once have devastated him began to feel like useful information rather than personal attack. Praise that might once have inflated his ego began to feel pleasant but not necessary for his sense of self-worth. This transformation was not about becoming indifferent to others or disconnected from social relationships. Instead, it was about developing what Jung called psychological differentiation, the ability to distinguish between our own authentic responses and the projections, expectations, and opinions of others. Jung's horse test, which Dr. Chen had administered to Marcus on their first meeting, serves as a powerful metaphor for this process of psychological differentiation. When we choose a horse in 3 seconds, we bypass the analytical mind that usually tries to give the right answer or the response we think others want to hear. Instead, we access our authentic, unconscious knowing. The speed of the exercise, 3 seconds, is crucial because it doesn't allow time for the persona, the false self, to construct an acceptable response. In that brief moment of spontaneous choice, we reveal something true about our inner landscape, something that our conscious mind might never acknowledge or accept. Marcus's journey illustrates how this kind of unconscious revelation can become the starting point for profound psychological transformation. His immediate choice of the tired horse had shown him exactly what needed attention and healing. His memory of being the black horse had revealed what was possible when he operated from his authentic nature. But Jung's psychology goes beyond individual healing to address broader questions about human potential and social transformation. He believed that when individuals undertake the work of individuation, when they learn to distinguish between their authentic selves and the false personas they've constructed to fit in, they become agents of positive change in the world. Marcus began to see evidence of this principle in his own life. As he became more authentic at work, he found himself naturally challenging practices and policies that felt ethically questionable. His renewed connection to his own truth made it impossible for him to participate in the kind of corporate duplicity he had previously accepted as normal. This shift was not about becoming rebellious or difficult, but about operating from a place of genuine integrity. Jung understood that when people are connected to their authentic nature, they naturally tend to act in ways that serve not just their own well-being but the well-being of the larger community. The process of destroying the weak self, therefore, is not a selfish or narcissistic endeavor but a contribution to the health of society as a whole. When individuals stop operating from false personas and limiting beliefs, they become less susceptible to manipulation by authoritarian leaders, less likely to participate in systems of oppression, and more capable of creative problem-solving. Marcus's story continued to unfold over the 2 years he worked with Dr. Chen. The process was not always smooth or linear. There were times when the tired horse seemed to regain control, when old patterns of exhaustion and disconnection would reassert themselves. But Jung's psychology had prepared Marcus for this reality. Individuation is not a destination but a way of traveling, not a problem to be solved once and for all but a dynamic process of ongoing relationship with the various aspects of the psyche. The horse test that had initiated Marcus's journey became a tool he could use throughout his process of transformation. Periodically, Dr. Chen would show him the image again, asking him to notice which horse called to him in the present moment. Sometimes it was still the tired horse, but now Marcus could recognize this choice as information rather than identity. When the tired horse appeared, he knew it was time to pay attention to where he might be overextending himself or operating from the false self. Other times, different horses would call to him. The appearance of the white horse might signal a need for spiritual connection or time in nature. The brown horse might indicate a need for grounding and stability. The spotted horse often appeared when Marcus was ready to take creative risks or express his uniqueness more boldly. But, increasingly, Marcus found himself drawn to the black horse not because he was trying to choose it, but because it genuinely represented his authentic state of being. This shift marked a fundamental transformation in his relationship with his own psyche. Instead of being unconsciously controlled by archetypal energies, he had learned to work with them consciously and intentionally. Jung believed that this kind of conscious relationship with the unconscious represents the highest form of psychological development. It's not about eliminating the unconscious, which would be impossible, but about developing what he called a creative relationship with its wisdom and energy. Marcus's professional life began to reflect this inner transformation. Instead of climbing the corporate ladder according to someone else's definition of success, he began to look for ways to align his work with his authentic values and interests. This didn't mean abandoning financial security. The brown horse's wisdom reminded him that stability was important, but it did mean refusing to sacrifice his soul for external rewards. Eventually, Marcus made the decision to leave his corporate position and start his own consulting firm, focusing on helping other organizations develop more authentic and sustainable business practices. This career change represented the integration of all the horses within his psyche: the black horse's passion and power, the white horse's vision and purpose, the brown horse's practical wisdom, the spotted horse's creativity, and even the tired horse's understanding of what happens when people become disconnected from their authentic nature. The transformation was not without challenges. Starting his own business required Marcus to face fears and insecurities he had been avoiding for years. There were times when the financial uncertainty felt overwhelming, when he questioned whether he had made the right choice. But Jung's psychology had given Marcus tools for navigating these challenges from a place of authentic power rather than reactive fear. When difficult emotions arose, instead of seeing them as problems to be eliminated, he learned to treat them as information from his unconscious about what needed attention or adjustment. The tired horse, which had initially seemed like Marcus's greatest weakness, became one of his most valuable allies in his new work. His personal experience of exhaustion and disconnection had given him deep empathy for the clients who came to him struggling with similar issues. He could recognize the signs of burnout and inauthenticity in others because he had learned to recognize them in himself. This is one of the profound paradoxes of Jung's approach to psychology: our greatest wounds often become our greatest sources of wisdom and strength. The aspects of ourselves that we initially experience as weaknesses or limitations can become, through conscious integration, sources of unique insight and ability to serve others. Marcus's journey illustrates the truth of Jung's assertion that the man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others. By learning to distinguish between his authentic nature and the false personas he had constructed to fit in and succeed, Marcus had developed a kind of psychological immunity to external manipulation and control. This didn't mean he became indifferent to feedback or resistant to influence. Instead, he developed what Jung called conscious choice about which influences to accept and which to reject. When someone criticized his work, Marcus could consider whether the feedback was valid without automatically accepting it as truth or defensively rejecting it out of hand. When someone tried to pressure him into compromising his values for financial gain, Marcus found he could decline without the internal conflict that had once characterized such situations. His connection to his authentic nature, symbolized by the black horse, had become a reliable compass for navigating complex social and professional situations. The 3-second horse test that had initiated Marcus's transformation contained within it all the elements of Jung's revolutionary approach to psychology. The speed of the response bypassed the false self's attempts to control the outcome. The archetypal symbolism of the horses connected Marcus to universal patterns of human experience. The unconscious wisdom revealed through his spontaneous choice provided exactly the information needed for his healing and growth. Jung understood that the unconscious mind is not random or chaotic but follows what he called meaningful patterns. The horse that calls to us in 3 seconds is not arbitrary but represents exactly what our psyche needs us to see and understand in that moment. For Marcus, the tired horse had been a perfect mirror for his condition at the time of the test. His unconscious had been trying to get his attention about the unsustainability of his lifestyle and the spiritual cost of his disconnection from authentic purpose. By bringing this exhausted aspect of himself into conscious awareness, he had created the possibility for genuine healing and transformation. But the test also revealed the solution within the problem. Marcus's memory of being the black horse as a child showed him that his connection to personal power and authentic self-expression had never been truly lost, only buried under layers of conditioning and false beliefs about what success should look like. This discovery illustrates another key principle of Jung's psychology: the symptoms that bring us to therapy often contain within them the seeds of their own healing. The depression, anxiety, or sense of meaninglessness that motivates people to seek help is not just a problem to be eliminated but a communication from the unconscious about what needs to change for greater wholeness and authenticity to emerge. As Marcus's story demonstrates, the journey from recognizing the tired horse to reclaiming the black horse is not about positive thinking or willpower but about developing a different kind of relationship with the various aspects of the psyche. Instead of judging some parts of himself as good and others as bad, Marcus learned to see all the horses as valuable sources of information and energy. The tired horse taught him about his limits and the importance of sustainable pacing. The white horse connected him to spiritual meaning and transcendent purpose. The brown horse grounded him in practical wisdom and stability. The spotted horse encouraged his creativity and uniqueness. And the black horse provided the foundation of authentic power and self-expression from which all other aspects of his personality could operate. Jung's concept of individuation involves learning to access these different archetypal energies consciously rather than being unconsciously controlled by them. When Marcus was unconsciously identified with the tired horse, he experienced its energy as his entire reality. When he learned to relate to it consciously, it became one valuable voice among many in his internal council of advisors. This process of psychological integration is what Jung believed made individuals truly immune to external manipulation and control. When we operate from our authentic nature, accessing the full range of our psychological resources, we become much less vulnerable to the projections, expectations, and attempted manipulations of others. The statement, "The man who destroys his weak self can never be destroyed by others," is not about becoming invulnerable or insensitive, but about developing the kind of authentic strength that comes from conscious relationship with our own truth. This strength is not brittle or defensive but flexible and responsive, capable of adapting to circumstances without losing connection to core values and authentic nature. Marcus's transformation from the tired horse to the black horse, with conscious access to all the other archetypal energies within his psyche, represents the kind of psychological development that Jung believed was not only possible but necessary for human flourishing. In a world full of external pressures to conform, achieve, and suppress our authentic nature, the work of individuation becomes an act of both personal healing and social responsibility. The 3-second horse test, simple as it appears, opens a doorway to this profound process of self-discovery and transformation. By revealing which archetypal energy is most active in our unconscious at any given moment, it provides a starting point for the lifelong journey of conscious relationship with our own psyche. Jung understood that this work is never complete, that individuation is not a destination but a way of traveling through life with awareness, authenticity, and access to the full range of human psychological potential. Marcus's story illustrates how this journey unfolds, not in a straight line from problem to solution, but in the spiral pattern that Jung called circumambulation, approaching the same core issues from deeper and deeper levels of understanding and integration. The tired horse that Marcus chose in his first 3 seconds with Dr. Chen had been both his greatest symptom and his most valuable teacher. By learning to relate to it consciously rather than being unconsciously controlled by it, he had discovered not only what needed healing but also what was possible when that healing occurred. The black horse that emerged as Marcus reconnected with his authentic nature was not a denial or rejection of the tired horse, but its transformation through conscious awareness and intentional relationship. This is the essence of what Jung meant by destroying the weak self, not elimination of difficult aspects of personality, but their transformation through conscious integration into a more complete and authentic way of being. Years later, Marcus would sometimes return to Dr. Chen's office, not as a client but as a colleague, to discuss the ongoing journey of individuation and the ways that Jung's insights continued to inform his work with his own clients. The horse test remained a powerful tool in his practice, a simple yet profound way of helping people access their unconscious wisdom and begin the transformative journey toward authentic selfhood. Each time he administered the test, Marcus was reminded of his own journey from the tired horse to the black horse, from exhaustion and disconnection to vitality and authentic self-expression. He understood that the 3 seconds it takes to choose a horse can mark the beginning of a transformation that lasts a lifetime, opening doorways to psychological resources and spiritual potentials that many people never know they possess. The man who destroys his weak self, not through violence or harsh self-judgment, but through the patient, compassionate work of conscious relationship with all aspects of his psyche, becomes truly immune to the attempts of others to diminish, manipulate, or control him. This immunity comes not from hardness or indifference, but from the authentic strength that emerges when someone operates from their true nature rather than from the false personas constructed to meet others' expectations. Marcus's story, beginning with a simple 3-second choice among 5 horses, illustrates the profound truth that Jung discovered through decades of working with the human psyche. Within each of us lie all the resources necessary for psychological healing, spiritual growth, and authentic self-expression. The work of individuation is simply the process of learning to access these resources consciously and intentionally, transforming symptoms into strengths and wounds into sources of wisdom. The tired horse that had once seemed like Marcus's greatest limitation became, through conscious relationship and compassionate integration, one of his most valuable allies in the ongoing journey of authentic living. And the black horse that had always been present within him, though temporarily buried under years of conditioning and false beliefs, emerged not as a rejection of his past but as its transformation into something more whole, more authentic, and ultimately more useful to both himself and the world he sought to serve.